Hey kids, the Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. Now today it's time for another one of my long-term living with type reviews. I've had this little bike, would you believe, for nearly 7 months. I've been running this since September of last year. People said, those Chinese bikes are all very well, but will they survive a British winter? Well, it's now the end of March, British summertime is upon us, and I've been running this bike through all sorts of weathers, in all sorts of conditions. If you're interested in cheap Chinese motorcycles, stick around, stay tuned, find out how I've got on. So the little Sinnis Scrambler then, a 125cc Chinese-made motorcycle, imported by Sinnis down in Brighton in the UK, and sold for just under £1,600. Absolutely amazing price for a motorcycle. You can get 10 of these for the price of a brand new GS. Are these 10 times less fun is the question, I guess. So anyway, this little Scrambler, as I say, I've been riding it now for 7 months. I've done hundreds of miles on it. I've ridden it in all sorts of weathers, rain, wind, snow, as you're going to see. I've ridden it on fast roads, slow roads. I've done absolutely everything I can with this bike to bring you a proper, honest review of what Chinese motorcycles are like to live with. So stick around, stay tuned. I'll take you through some of those things now, and then what we'll do towards the end of the video, I'll give you a kind of a cost of ownership rundown. How much does one of these things cost to actually run? And then also all the pros and cons that I found out about the bike. Of course, it's not perfect. There are some negatives with it, but there are plenty of positives as well. So I'll give you those at the end of the video. So of course, bikes like the little 125 Scrambler really come to their own around town. So what's the little bike like around town? Well, of course, what the Sinnis has in its favour is its extreme lightweight. So around town it's just so easy to flick around, manoeuvre between traffic if you need to. It really is a great little bit of urban transport. Because you're sitting bolt upright, you've got really good situational awareness of what's around you. The mirrors work really well, so you can see everything around. So you can work your way through the traffic a treat. So as expected, around town in the urban environment, absolutely no issue at all. You need a bike to get you to work, and this one can do that. So what's the little Sinnis Scrambler like in wet conditions then? Well, it's pretty wet at the moment. It's a horrible day. It's been raining pretty much all day, and the roads are really greasy and slippery and horrible. And so if you were to ask me the question what it's like riding in the wet, I'd say absolutely horrible. It's grim. But that's not actually a reflection necessarily on the Scrambler. That's just my thoughts on riding motorcycles in the wet generally. Something, if planned, I try and avoid, but sometimes you can't avoid it, and it just is wet. So anyway, there we are. So out and about on the bike now in this horrible weather, and well, what's this bike like? It's like any other bike of this nature, I guess. You can't afford to go hooning around on two wheels in the wet because it is a lot more slippery than usual. And of course the little Sinnis doesn't have things like traction control, so there's not a lot of electronic trickery keeping you safe. Well, in fact, none. So you've got to be really careful on the braking, and you just got to take it easy on the roads because physics will quickly take over and have you off the bike if you're not careful. Also, the stock tyres that come on here being knobblies and Chinese made of uncertain manufacturer. I've never heard of the manufacturer that make these tyres. I wouldn't like to say they're super grippy in the wet. I've not had a problem, it has to be said, but then I'm riding pretty carefully because it is wet. It's not a bike that you would I think you'd want to push in the wet too much. That said, if you ride sensibly, here I am, normal road speeds, keep within the speed limits. It's a pretty filthy day, and the bike's absolutely fine. I've had no issues with the bike running in the wet. The brakes work absolutely fine in the wet. No problems in the wet, basically. Just take it easy on the little thing. So what's the Sinnis Scrambler like in proper wintry conditions then? I don't come much more wintry than this. We've got about 6 inches of snow. It is super slippery, and I've barely got any grip. I'm on the stock tyres. It's all I can do just to keep the bike moving and not falling off. But actually, the stock tyres, they're quite knobbly. It's not as bad as you might think. That said, I do not recommend riding a bike in snow unless you have to. So this is a quick experiment that is going to be quickly ended. But let's not have it said that I didn't try the Sinnis in every possible weather condition. Holy cow. Oh, come on, you can do it. Wow. Oh no, I'm stuck in a rut now. Oh. Come on, bike, you can do it. I've got absolutely no traction whatsoever now. The back wheel's just slipping away. Come on, you can do it. Oh, rolling slightly. Oh man, if you want a good workout, ride a bike in the snow. Oh, roll on summer. So as a general matter of choice, I tend not to ride too much at night, particularly in the middle of winter. It's very cold out tonight, as you can see. The moon is bright, so you can see that up there. Cloudless night, and it's about freezing. So it's on the limit of temperatures I'm happy to ride in anyway. It's going to be below freezing tonight, later on. But I did want to come out and just test the little Sinnis when it was dark, just to show you what the lighting's like on here. And I didn't have high hopes for the lighting on here, because it always strikes me as a bit dim looking during the day. But actually at night time, it does throw a fair old degree of light. It's absolutely fine, and no worse than any other motorcycle I've ridden at night. I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised with that. Now of course the Sinnis is a very basic bike, so there's nothing like lit controls or anything like that. But there's not many controls, so it's pretty easy to find stuff. Let's go to full beam. Oops, that was off. Full beam is there we go. Full beam's pretty good, I have to say, for a little normal headlight. It's not LED or anything fancy light, it's just a normal, you know, halogen type filament light. It really does throw out good light. It's really quite impressive. Let's go back to dip again. Yeah, I can see way down the road, nothing wrong with that at all. So as far as riding at night is concerned on the little Sinnis Scrambler, no problem at all. So at the start of the video I promised you that I'll give you a rundown of what the cost of ownership of one of these bikes is. So I've done a bit of research as usual, made some notes just so I can make sure I get these right. So costs of owning this bike then. First thing is road tax, or vehicle excise duty as we should rightly call it here in the UK. Because it's only 125cc, less than 600cc, that means to tax the thing, to get it on the road, it's just £18 per annum. So you know, virtually nothing, incredible. 18 quid for road tax. Insurance on it, I went to my friends at Principal Insurance. Of course, they've got my details on their files, and I got a quote from them for somebody in my situation. So this is only an indicative quote. Of course, if you're my age, you live in my house, and you've got my no claims bonus, this is what you could get, but it may be different for you, of course, depending on your circumstances. They quoted me £83.66 per annum insurance with £200 excess. So 83 quid to insure the bike. Again, very reasonable price, as you'd expect. And then I guess the other cost to factor in mind is servicing. Now, it's just a very simple single-cylinder 125cc bike. You can pretty much service it yourself, in fact. That's what I would do if I owned one. But if you want to take it to a dealer, to be sure, they need to factor in about £100 a year for servicing on the bike as well. So if you add all that up, that comes to £201.66 per year, or a grand total of £16.80 a month. In order to keep one of these in your garage, roadworthy, ready to go. Doesn't include petrol costs or depreciation, anything like that, but that is the cost if you want to run one of these bikes. So I think, well, that's definitely the cheapest bike that I've come across in terms of running costs, I think, so far. So what about on faster roads, on dual carriageways and motorways then? Well, here we are. I'm on a dual carriageway and I'm doing an indicated 65 flat out, 5th gear. Slightly downhill, it has to be said, and I'm a little bit tucked up. So that pretty much is as quick as the Sinnis will do. Actually, I'm just approaching 70 now, and I'm 12.5 stone, so that sort of gives you an idea of the top speed of the bike. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's only a 125, so you don't expect it to do stupid speeds. And if you're going to use the bike as a commuter and you've got the odd stretch of dual carriageway, then certainly it can hold its own like this as long as you like. But you're not going to be absolutely flying, of course, on these roads. In terms of wind protection and so on, actually the airflow is nice and smooth over the bike. No problem at all. I'm not getting buffeted around. There's no dirty airflow coming over me. It's actually not too bad at all. So for the occasional bit of faster road riding, expect to be able to maintain 60, 65 and you'll be fine. Not a bike I would necessarily want to take on the motorway though, it has to be said. Partly because it's physically a very small bike, and if it's a very busy bit of traffic, before I started recording I was on a very busy roundabout, you do feel a little bit exposed on such a small bike. I don't really know why that is. I think it might be to do with road presence. I just feel like I'm not being seen as much as I would be if I were on a bigger bike. But in terms of being able to maintain higher speeds, I'm going uphill again now. I'm maintaining a steady 60. It's perfectly doable.
So the bike then does pick up quite a lot of crud, as you can see here on the mud guards and around the engine. Of course, it's all very exposed to the elements there. So you are going to have to look after the bike, so give it a good old clean in the usual way. Plenty of suds in all those hard to get to areas will ensure that she looks spangly. A good old rinse off, and then what I always recommend is a bike dryer. You've probably seen me use one of these before. Gets all the moisture out of the nooks and crannies. And then if you really want to do a premium job, apply ACF 50. If you don't know how to do that, check out one of my videos on how to apply ACF 50, and then the bike will look staying spangly for longer.
Now, somebody asked me to, on these reviews, show you what the seating position was like and also what is the horn like. So I'll quickly do that now. Can't remember who it was who asked, but seating position on this, really low seat. I can get 5'8", flat-footed on both sides. It's a really light bike, really unintimidating, brilliant to sit on, absolutely fine. As far as the horn's concerned, turn her on. So high pitch, but really loud. Just as good as any other horn on any other motorcycle I've ever used. So what about fueling the bike up? Well, this is the first time I've put fuel in it. I recorded this section when I first got the bike on the first day. And just want to see if I get any surprises when I try and fill her up. Sometimes the fuel caps can be a bit tricky on different bikes. Let's see how this one goes. Okay, unlock, and off she pops. No drama at all. Now let's hope it's easy to put back on as well. Let's just tuck that there. Sorry to the Health and Safety Brigade for sitting on the bike while I fill up. There we go, that looks like 10 litres to me. Right, let's try getting this back on then, so it just looks like it goes like so. Or even like so. No problem, just got to line up the lugs and she snaps on. No worries at all. Excellent. Right, better go and pay. Right, let's crack on as there's a car waiting. All good. So there it, no drama at the fuel station. Normally at this point on one of these long-term reviews I'll talk about the fuel gauge and how long it takes to register that I've just filled the bike up. Well, unfortunately the little Sinnis Scrambler is one of those bikes that doesn't come with a fuel gauge, it just has a low fuel light. So can't do that particular bit of the test. And that's one of the downsides of the bike, because I just don't understand why all bikes don't have fuel gauges. But there we are. So I'll just have to go by range of the bike, if you like. So what's involved then in looking after a bike like this day to day? And this is an extremely important point about these bikes. One of the reasons that Chinese bikes get such a bad press is because people tend to buy them because they're cheap, and therefore they run them on the cheap, by which I mean they don't look after them properly. That is one of the biggest causes of these things deteriorating. If you look after them, I believe they will last, you know, a good period of time. So the basic things you've got to do, you've got to obviously change the oil, get the thing serviced every year. You've got to lube the chain every now and then to make sure there's no rust on there and give that a good clean. Any bike you'd have to do this with. You've got to clean her occasionally, make sure she's nice and clean. Also, I've ACF 50'd this one. I've given it a good covering with ACF 50 through winter to keep the salt at bay, and it's kept the bike in remarkably good condition. So the point is with these bikes, you've got to look after them if you want them to maintain in a reasonable condition. Given this one has gone through a pretty harsh British winter, I think you'll agree this thing is standing up remarkably well. It looks good. I mean, I have kept it in the garage, of course, and I do, you know, I'm quite OCD about cleaning my bike, so I have kept the thing clean, as I mentioned and showed you. I've ACF 50'd it as well. So it had, you know, it's been looked after in a good way, but I would thoroughly encourage you to do the same, because that way you keep your bike looking, frankly, as good as the day that it was delivered to me brand new. So at the start of the video, I promised you a list of the things that I found out about the bike in terms of what are the positives and negatives. Well, let's do the negatives first, just to get them out of the way. Again, I've made a list here to make sure I don't forget anything. So first thing, and these are in no particular order, and this is a common issue I have with lots of motorcycles, no fuel gauge. So it's got a low fuel light when you run low, but there is no gauge on it, which is a bit of a shame. So that's something that irks me about new bikes generally. This one's no different, no fuel gauge, so that's one thing. The other thing that I found out with this is the exhaust on here. Although it's got this doozy sort of scrambler style one, I found initially when I rode it, it burnt my leg. Even though it's got this wrapping on it, it gets hot, and it did burn my leg and burnt my textiles a little bit, which wasn't good. So spoke to Sinnis about that, and they actually supplied me with this little guard here, which I put on, which looks quite good and actually does fix that problem. So I don't know if that's going to become a fixture for the bikes in the future, but if you have a leg burning issue, get yourselves one of those guards, that fixes that. The other thing, the Odo on here, which looks really cool. It's kind of old school, looks kind of old fashioned. Unfortunately, it's in kilometres. So that's the, you know, the actual odometer itself. The speedo is in kilometres and miles now, but the odometer is in kilometres. So that's a bit of a nuisance for a bike in the UK. Next thing, which is a real pain when it comes to maintenance, and again related to the exhaust, you can't remove the oil cap because the exhaust is in the way. So the oil cap is down here somewhere. Here it is. And when you can see by where it's positioned, if you try and actually undo that and take it off, the exhaust is just in the way. So it's a crazy bit of design there. I think if I had one of these bikes, I'd possibly have a different exhaust fitted anyway. But yeah, so when you want to change the oil or check the oil, you have to actually remove the exhaust. So that's absolutely rubbish. It has to be said. That's one of the worst things I've ever found on a bike. In terms of stuff going wrong with the bike, I've had no issues with it. It's proved to be completely reliable. The only issue I had was on about the 5th day that I had it. I went out on a green lane, you may have seen the video on this months ago, and the side stand screw got loose, and that meant that the little click switch in there triggered and I couldn't start the bike, so I had to just tighten that up. That's the only issue I've had with it, and as I say, that was early on. It was just one loose screw that was missed on the pre-delivery inspection checks. So once that was done, I've had no other issues with the bike in terms of reliability. In terms of riding it, there are some vibrations. It is a single-cylinder bike. It is a very simple engine. The engine itself is based on a Suzuki design. It is a bit vibey, it has to be said, particularly if you're thrashing the pants off it, which you will be doing a lot of the time. So, bit of vibes through the handlebars and through the seat. It's a cheap motorcycle. I can't really complain about that. I just mentioned it because they are there and you need to be aware of it. Talking about it, the little engine on here, it does run out of puff. When you go uphill. Again, this is a fairly common thing with all 125s, but if you're going uphill with a strong headwind, then the thing does slow down. So just be aware of that. It's not a powerful bike by any means. And in fact, it tops out at sort of 50 miles an hour is the top speed you're going to get out of this bike. So you're not going to be breaking many speed limits. You're not going to be losing your licence. So that could be seen as a good thing. Next thing I noticed on this, front brake. Works quite well, but actually quite noisy for some reason. It's settled down a bit as I've been using it. I think maybe it just needed bedding in, but to start with, it used to whistle quite a lot when I used the front brake. That's sort of fixed itself now, but just something I thought I'd mention. And then the other thing about it, really, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It's a great design little bike, but it is just a little bit too small, perhaps. I'm not a particularly big person, and I feel like a bit of an ape when I'm riding it. I think if it was scaled up a bit, it would just make it so much better. But there you go. That's just one of the things. So that's it for the negatives. That's all I could find about the bike that was bad, which surprised me. I thought I'd find all sorts of things. I guess the worst thing is the design of that oil cap, but that's probably just down to this, you know, being the Scrambler design. But otherwise, yeah, it's proved to be reliable. It always starts, you know, in cold weather, and it's been pretty cold recently. Really has surprised me in that respect. All right, that's it for the negatives. Let's have a look at the positives.
So what are the upside of the bike then? What are the positives that I found out of the bike having run this bike for the last 7 months? Well, there are plenty, but the first one for me, I mean, just look at it. The bike just looks fantastic. I mean, it's proper old school retro design. I think if you put BSA on the side of the tank and distressed it a bit, people would think it was a proper old British motorcycle. It's absolutely fantastic the way they've done the styling. I really love the looks of the bike. They've actually, you know, they've got 10 out of 10 on that one as far as I'm concerned. So first of all, the looks. The next thing about it is its weight. I mentioned this before. The thing is just super lightweight. I mean, it's basically, think of it as a heavy bicycle. If you ride this and you drop it, you can pick it up with one hand, frankly. It's just completely unintimidating, everything about the bike. It's just good old-fashioned fun. So lightweight as well is fantastic on it. The other things that I noticed were, the tyres, the stock tyres on this, they look, you know, they're from a Chinese manufacturer that I've never heard of before, and I didn't have great hope on them, but I actually took the bike off-road. Again, I've got a video on me green laning on the bike. And actually they held up really well. Not only do they work off-road, so if you want to just get one of these for some light green laning, you could do that, but actually on the road they're okay as well. Much more grippy than they deserve to be. So the cheap, nasty Chinese tyres that I thought would be one of the things that I really, you know, want to change quickly, turned out to be actually really rather good. So that surprised me. What else? I've mentioned the fun factor. It's just a fun bike. I mean, for the price, it's the bang for the buck is huge on this. Now, earlier on, I think I said you get this for just under 1,600 quid. That was incorrect. The price is actually £1,695 plus on-the-road costs. But my goodness me, that is so cheap for a, you know, what other form of transport can you buy for £1,695 that's going to give you as much fun as one of these things? It really is a great price. So yeah, the cheapness as well has to be, of course, a big positive. All right, so much for that then. Again, having got to know the bike really well, given the length of time I've had it, what are the things that I would change about it if it were mine? So a few things have occurred to me that I would change if the bike were mine and I were keeping this forever. Unfortunately, I'm not, and it's not. And they are as follows. First of all, I would possibly rat it. Even though it looks really cool like this, I think if you took you know, a bit of an angle grinder or something to the tank and made this look, strip this back to aluminium and then maybe lacquered it, I think that would look fantastic. Maybe paint it matte, something like that. I think a bit of ratting might be in order for a bike like this, and because it is so cheap, you could afford to do that and not feel that you were, you know, damaging a very expensive bike. The other thing I would do, as I mentioned before, is change the exhaust. Although this looks quite cool, it isn't cool. It does burn your leg a bit. This little shield helps, but it's just not that practical, that exhaust. It doesn't sound very good either. So I'd probably change that for a lower set one that sounded a little bit better. So that's another change I'd make. The mud guards, a bit too shiny and blingy for me. I think I maybe just remove those, just again to add to its sort of Scrambler authenticity, or maybe just cut them down and make them a bit shorter again, maybe as part of the ratting. I think I would consider maybe putting a rack on the back, just so you can carry stuff. That's always handy, just to strap a rucksack to or whatever. So a little rack on the back I think I'd do. And the other thing I would definitely do is remove or just change these mirrors, maybe some bar ends, or just lose mirrors altogether. I think that would just tidy up the front in a treat. These mirrors, well, they work well, they just look a bit sort of like Mickey Mouse here, so they would have to go, I think. And then the only other thing that I would do is, I mentioned before, I'd make sure I looked after it. As long as you look after the bike, then I see no reason why it couldn't give you several years of great service. So there we go, that's my long-term living with type review of the little Sinnis Scrambler. I have to say, I'm going to be quite sorry to see this little bike go. If I had the room in the garage, I'd probably make Sinnis an offer to keep hold of this bike, because it's been a right laugh, great fun. 125cc bikes are really good. So well, what I must just say is thank you very much to Sinnis for lending me the bike for such a long time and having the faith in me and their product to actually run it through a winter, as I have done, to see how the thing stood up. So hopefully it's answered that question for you. Chinese bikes come in for a lot of stick, but I'm convinced if you look after them, you can get some good service out of them and you know, great value and return on your investment. Okay, so I hope that's been of some interest to you, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Till then, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.